Hello, bit of a rare one, a video about myself, about kind of diagnosis journey, my healing journey, self-discovery journey, whatever you want to call it, all kind of rolled into one. Um, so obviously with Jaden's kind of like diagnosis journey and everything else, I don't know why I keep using the word journey, it's a weird one, isn't it? But yeah, Jaden got diagnosed in 2020, so just over 2 years ago now. But obviously there was a long lead up to his diagnosis, and during that whole time when I was kind of going through things with him, I was like, well, they're all quite relatable to me. And now with my daughter as well, like she is like a mini me in a lot of ways as well. So by the time he was getting his diagnosis, I was probably starting to think like maybe I relate a bit too much to a lot of the things that he struggles with. I mean, food, I can remember like before I got pregnant, like when we were planning on having children, obviously we went through fertility, IVF, everything else. But in the run up to kind of like all of that, when we first talked about having children, that was like there were so many things like in terms of my diet, like I'm not a good role model to my children in terms of like what I eat or what I can eat, like even the way I talk about food, those kind of things. Like I would look at something and be like, I can't even imagine. Like we had a takeaway pizza last night because I was exhausted, and the chips, like I took one look at the chips and I was like, oh, like I visually inspect chips from every angle. But and I know where that comes from because when I was I don't know, maybe like 8 or something, I can remember being no, not 8, maybe like 10. I can remember how we very, very rarely obviously had like McDonald's or anything back there, but I can remember vividly being in McDonald's, putting a chip in my mouth and wanting to be sick. Like I don't know whether like in my head it tasted like off the scale bad, but in reality it may have just been like slightly different because Jaden has like or used to have like sensory meltdowns and things around like that kind of thing. But I can remember that thing of putting a chip in my mouth and it being so horrendous, but not being able to spit it out because you're sat at a table with it wasn't my family, so like sat at a table with like a friend, like their family and that kind of thing, and like yeah, like so every kind of item of food, like I things that I do eat, I am still weird with. So yeah, this box of chips had come last night, and I looked at it and I was like, oh, like some of them had skin on, and some of them like they didn't look like just regular, normal, like perfect fries. So straight away I offered to Jaden because I knew like he'd struggle with them as well. Like I offered to pick out the ones that I thought he'd be able to eat because I didn't want him to just reject them. So I put the ones that I knew he'd be able to eat onto his plate for him. But yeah, that's a tangent. So throughout his diagnosis journey, things that he struggles with, sensory things, I think like even noise, like I don't think I realised when I was younger how much I struggle with noise and things. I think I became more aware of it through Jaden because obviously noise that would trigger him, I would think, oh, there's a hand dryer in the toilets, this, that, and I became more aware of noises in that sense. But in terms of overall noise levels, if I'm somewhere noisy now, I really struggle with that rather than it just be like, even if Jane's not with me, like I really struggle with it, which I wouldn't have really even realised beforehand. I've always known, obviously, anxiety wise, like I've had anxiety my entire life, which that's when you kind of realise that's not anxiety, that's autism, because people develop anxiety at some point through their life. They don't remember being like my first memories of being like 4 or 5. I was anxious. I was the child that they couldn't get through the door in school because I was clinging to my mum's crying and screaming. I was anxious at that age, which isn't normal unless you either have some kind of trauma or like neurodiversity kind of things. So yeah, and I've always in my relationship with my ex-husband, like there were so many things that I couldn't do, I couldn't cope with. Like I don't think I'd ever ordered food for myself in a restaurant until I was 30 because that was when we separated and when I kind of like had to do things for myself and that kind of thing, or like I'd make excuses why a friend would order for me or somebody else would. If we went out anywhere, he'd have to literally like walk me to the toilets, he'd have to like just silly little things. But he'd say like, oh, could you just ring for a pizza or something? I'd be like, I can't. He'd be like, well, why? I can't explain it. I just can't. I can't make phone calls. I can't do like there's so many little things that in my brain aren't little things. They're huge. Um, that yeah, you get to the point where you're like, why can I not be normal? Why can I not? I can remember the twins were babies. There being so many times where like I couldn't go into a supermarket. I not really like it. I haven't been like it for quite a while, but when the twins were younger, whether they were with me or not, like there were days where I could not physically. I would sit in Morris's car park and I could not force myself to go into the supermarket to do a shop, or I couldn't force myself to go into the gym to do do a workout. I think what I was trying to say then. So yeah, in terms of autism, I think self-diagnosis, self-identifying as autistic is completely valid, and I don't think a piece of paper will particularly change anything massively, because if anything, it's just kind of like through this kind of like self-discovery, I guess, like that I'm just kinder to myself because I understand why I struggle with things. Does that make sense? So like, I know that I can't make phone calls. I know that I can't do this, that, the other. Although if it's for the children, obviously I can, if that makes it, because you have to. Like if I need to ring the doctor for the twins, that's not an issue. If I need to ring the doctor for myself, my partner does it for me because I can't. Like it's bizarre. And that, yeah, my therapist would say that comes to obviously like a need to meet other people's needs and not being able to meet your own needs and all that kind of thing. But I think like it definitely comes under autism as well. So yeah, with the autism diagnosis, it's a long journey and I'm waiting for that kind of call to say, right, you've got a letter or whatever to say that I've got an appointment and it will all be great and I'll have this piece of paper that kind of says this is why you are how you are. And that's kind of it with autism. Whereas over the last probably only, well, a year ago I started saying to school that I thought my daughter had ADHD, and they still don't. They say that they don't see signs of ADHD in her, and I'm like, do a quick Google search, educate yourself. Like ADHD in girls is completely different to ADHD, or can be completely different to ADHD in boys. Inattentive ADHD is completely different to hyperactive ADHD. I think she has combined, so when she's at home she's bouncing off the walls. But because she also has autism, because she also masks in school she shows every sign of having inattentive ADHD. And in the report that we had for her, she had like CCN in for her autism referral, and in that, as you know, she struggles with paying attention, she's very withdrawn, she's overly like if they criticize her in terms of like if she spelled a word wrong or like, you know, her work's scruffy or something like that, if they just give the tiniest little bit of like constructive criticism, even her entire face physically drops and you see almost like pain in her face. That's ADHD, that's RSD. Like, so yeah, I kind of saw it in her before I saw it in myself. And now I think with ADHD it's a completely different thing because I don't think at this age I would want Ella medicated or anything like that. It's a completely different thing. But for myself, my partner's just got ADHD medication, and the more I've looked into it, the more I'm like, I could see how that could help me. For him, he's got very much hyperactive ADHD, impulsive, all that kind of side of it, which I don't really have all that kind of side of it, but the rejection sensitivity, executive dysfunction, all the kind of side of it that I struggle with, the kind of like female side of it, if we dare say that, the inattentive side of it, the things that I kind of struggle with that I think medication would help with. Yeah, it's a completely different thing. So whereas with autism, I would say like obviously self-diagnosis, self-identification is enough in a lot of cases. With ADHD, like that wouldn't, like me just saying, oh, I think I've got ADHD, like wouldn't help, wouldn't solve anything. It's not like I'm just kinder to myself. If I can't do the housework, it's not magically to do the housework, do you know what I mean? So yeah, I think I'm going to get a referral for an ADHD assessment. And potentially, I think the things that it would help me with are like just keeping on top of things, because I think people think that you have that kind of laziness, which I don't in the slightest. I will sit here. There are days where I have that kind of paralysis where I'm just literally sat here and I'm so overwhelmed by the state of the house and how much needs doing and the washing and the drying. What do I do first? And oh, I can't even start this because I'd have to do that. And like, I have to think through in like every step in my brain that I can't then physically get up and do any of it. Or the waiting, which I never knew this was I knew it was a thing in my brain. I never knew it was an ADHD thing, or that like it was a thing that because you have no concept or ability to manage your time as such. So not that I'm never late, I'm obsessively early. So like I'm the opposite end of it in that terms. But like because I know I've got work at 4 o'clock later, even though that's like past the time when I'd have to pick up the children anyway, so that's irrelevant to an extent. It's harder for me to do things now because all I'm thinking is there's already something in the diary. My brain can't quite think what can I do in the day because I'm already doing something, even though that's like way off. It's like, yeah, you can't explain that kind of thing to people that don't. You either get that or you don't, because your brain either works like that or it doesn't. So yeah, what I have found is, and I'm not like a like I don't in any means recommend anybody getting into energy drinks, but the difference in my brain, like if I have energy drinks like a Monster or something like that on days when I'm like, because I've been so exhausted recently and twins have had sickness bugs and blah blah blah, like I would not physically make it through a day if I didn't have, like, I don't have like full cans, but like I have like half a can a day, and at the minute that is what helps me function. And the difference, I was saying to my partner this morning, like I don't get energy from it as such. I don't get hyper or anything like that. I get like clarity, is that even the right word? Like I can, when I'm doing things, rather than just noticing that something he's doing but not physically having the capacity to think, right, I can do that, I could just do that now, it will take 2 seconds, I actually just do it. Whereas like normally I would notice something he's doing and I would think like, I wish I could do it, but I can't. And I don't know whether, again, like unless it's something that you struggle with yourself, it'll probably make absolutely no sense to you whatsoever. But the difference of like how much I've got done this morning, and probably how fast I'm talking, but how much I've got done this morning, how productive I could be, like, and also like my plans have changed because I was meant to go out with a friend this morning and it got cancelled, and like normally that would completely throw me off and I would just be sat at him, why does she hate me, why am I not, like, all that kind of thing. And I've just managed to like completely unplanned morning and just blitz the house, like, what, just because I had like half a can of Monster. Where it's like, it's bizarre, but that is what makes me kind of think that maybe that is a similar effect to a stimulant medication, because there is this whole thing of like caffeine and ADHD. Like people with ADHD can literally like have caffeine and go to sleep, or you know, like it can like quieten your brain. It can make you like have one train of like make you have like one train of thought rather than the scatty like 100. Again, like unless you either get that or you don't, but like the kind of like, yeah, that, I don't even know what, there must be a word for it. Rather than like your brain thinking 100 things but not being able to do a single one of them, your brain can think one train of thoughts but get 10 things done. Does that make sense? um so yeah, my autism diagnosis, oh, I don't know what was that, I've got really itchy neck. Yeah, my autism diagnosis hopefully won't be too much longer.